You're listening to Sharky on Sharkgoeschomp. New York City, the city that never sleeps, seems to always be awake for the dead as well. So tonight we're going to look at a few haunted locations within the Big Apple. One if by land, two if by sea. Fine dining doesn't get much finer than here, with soft candlelight and the twinkling tunes of the piano playing in the background. One if by land, two if by sea is the perfect eatery for a romantic evening. Now, there's a naughty ghost here who likes to help themselves to them. Many lady diners report that there are earrings that mysteriously taken while sitting at the bar. Staff members and diners frequently report on often being pushed from behind by an invisible entity, and the lights often flicker and turn themselves on and off. If you hear plates smashing, it may not be a clumsy waiter. No. One of the ghosts here likes to play frisbee with the tableware, and another likes to rearrange the pictures on the wall. Some of the spirits here are mistaken for customers, and staff members are left speechless when they go to serve them, and then they just vanish before their very eyes. St. Mark's Church in the Bowery. This historic church that can be found in Manhattan is one of the oldest. It opened its heavenly doors back in 1799. But before St. Mark's Church stood the family farm and home of Dutch Colonel Governor Peter Stuyvesant. He died at his manor at the ripe old age of 80, and his soul was laid to rest in his very own chapel, which is now the Bowery. But before his manor burnt down, it was made way for the church. The first creepy encounter occurred soon after his death. Stuyvesant's servants of his manor reported seeing his ghostly apparition wandering around his old manor. That is, until it was burnt down. The fire didn't discourage this ghost, and in fact, it spurred this one on. When the church was being built, the workmen often hear weird, explainable noises coming from the area where Peter's body lays. 100 years on, and the spirit of the Dutch man is still very alive. The heaven church bells are often heard to ring all by themselves, and Peter likes to cause disturbances during services by speaking out loudly in Dutch. His ghostly spirit has been seen on a few occasions in the church, and he's not always alone. A lady ghost has been seen with him, often as they sit in a pew, chatting away with each other. The Campbell Apartments. If you're not heading out for a night of cocktails, why not head to Campbell Apartments in Grand Central Terminal? This unique, sophisticated chic bar is the place to go for an evening of luxurious glam. But don't let the lavish interior deter you of the fact that it seems that this is also the home to Mr. Campbell. Mr. Campbell died back in 1957. The ghost of Mr. Campbell is well known in the cocktail by all staff and their guests. Some say they can feel a cold wind as he whizzes past you, and others even report of being pushed by his ghostly hands. If you don't get to feel his ghostly presence, then you may hear it. Often, the organ will start to play invisible hands, and on occasions he likes nothing more than to be seen sitting up at the bar, sipping a cocktail of his very own. The Merchant House Museum. Voted the most haunted place in New York and Manhattan's most haunted house, the Merchant House had to make it onto the creepy ghost stories list of haunted New York. Owned and lived in for over 100 years by the Treadwell family, In particular, Gertrude Treadwell, who was born there in the upstairs bedroom and lived her whole spinster life there until her death 93 years later in 1933. But Gertrude wasn't the only member of the family to die in the house. In total, there were 8, yes, 8 deaths that occurred in that house. Gertrude didn't stay dead for very long. Only a short time after her death, her ghostly apparition was seen by workmen who were restoring the merchant's house, and creepy happenings had happened ever since. Lots of ghostly happenings are not only reported by the staff of the museum and the visitors, but even by people just walking past the house. There are many reports of weird smells that come from nowhere, floorboards that squeak above your head when no one is upstairs, unexplained noises that happen at any time of the day, doors slamming in front of your face. Even dark shadows are seen to wander the house. But the creepiest of the hauntings is the voices. These voices can be heard late at night when the museum is shut up tight. The Dakota. For one reason or another, most of us will have heard of the famous Dakota building, be it from a novel or movie, or as I know it, the place where John Lennon lived with his wife Yoko Ono until he was shot dead outside of the Dakota back in 1980 by a fan. Situated on Central Park West, this residential building houses more than just living beings. Reports of creepy ghosts and unexplainable goings-ons are rumored to go back to when the building was first erected in 1880 to 1884. Workmen of the building who were working inside the Dakota claimed to have seen the first reported ghost, that of a young girl with flowing blonde locks, bouncing her ball up the hall, and soon after that a resident saw the same little girl playing in the hall. This little ghost is still seen playing, even today, with her ball and entering locked closets to this very, very day. Another workman at the Dakota not only saw a ghost, but had a violent run-in with one. As the electrician was walking towards the basement, a short, ghostly man walked out with a pointed collar and a wig. The ghost apparently stared at the workman for a few moments before rushing up to him and taking his wig off and violently shaking it in his face before vanishing into thin air. It is thought that this little angry little man is that of Edward Cabot Clark, the architect of the Dakota, but died before the building was finished. Mr. Cabot Clark would make himself known in the same violent manner on a few more occasions, but hasn't been seen in recent years. However, if you haven't gone to see him, if you can be heard, for months after his last appearance, residents would complain of weird and loud noises coming from the basement. When workmen went to investigate, they had a shovel thrown at their heads, and no one was there. The noise soon faded after that. Another ghost who hasn't been heard or seen for a very long while is the Mad Slasher. This ghost got its name due to its violent behavior. The panels in the elevator started to be vandalized by a knife. Deep gashes were being gouged into them. At first, the residents thought it was vandals, but as soon as they were replaced, the same thing would happen and again and again and again. The gashes were too high up and too deep to be done by a human. The residents started to become very concerned when piles of papers were forced up on the 9th floor, as if someone was going to start a fire. But no fire ever broke out, and then suddenly all of this just stopped. Was this Edward C. Clark expressing his violent behavior once more? More recent reports of creepy activity is that of the Crying Lady. Many residents and even John Lennon himself have reported of seeing this lady ghost just walking aimlessly down the hallways. Is she the one who likes to turn the lights on and off all the time? Is she the one that likes to watch you as you walk by? Many people say they get the feeling that they are being followed or watched. Or is it John Lennon's spirit, whose footsteps they can hear up the stairs? It wouldn't be the first time Lennon made a ghostly appearance. Yoko Ono herself has claimed that John had come to her once. Yoko claims that John visited her in their apartment, and he was sat at his old white piano and looked at her and said, "Don't be afraid, I am still with you." Yoko Ono isn't the only person who claims to have seen this legendary Lennon. Other residents of the Dakota have claimed to have seen John's ghostly apparition. He's ever been seen just hanging around the outside, leaning against their doorway, and just watching the world pass by. You're listening to Sharky on sharkgoeschomp. Thank you for listening to tonight's story about New York City and the haunted places within. Reminder to send your stories to stories4sharky@gmail.com. And tell me about more stories about New York or any other ghostly encounters anywhere in the world. Have a good night.